5 minutes, and then members will ask questions. Ms. Del Greco, the GAO report asserts that the FBI failed, even though it's directed by law, to put out the privacy impact assessment. Why did the FBI not fulfill the law, the requirement of the law, and why did you not update the privacy impact assessment? You have to put the...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will defer to DOJ on that.
What do you mean defer to GAO? You are DOJ, so what do you mean defer?
The privacy impact assessment was submitted to the department. I will defer to them for a response.
I'm sorry, we're having a hearing to ask you the questions, and the DOJ would put you up there. You seem like a very nice person, but you're supposed to be the one to answer that question. What do you mean defer?
As I've stated, the privacy impact assessment was submitted, and
years late, right? Director Howard, you want to comment on this?
Yes, that's correct. It was submitted years after both systems were being used for real-world use.
So here's the problem. You're required by law to put out a privacy statement, and you didn't. And now we're supposed to trust you with hundreds of millions of people's faces in a system that you couldn't protect, even with the 702 issue. You know, we're talking about Mr. Flynn and how he was unmasked and all that, and there can be political gyrations, but set the name aside and Donald Trump and all that. But even in that most stringent circumstance where they're looking at information, somebody decided to take off that veil and release that out to the public. And we're supposed to, and the Office of Personnel Management had tens of millions of federal workers who had information, and some of it included fingerprints and other types of things, and that was stolen and let out, and those people are having to suffer the consequences the rest of their lives. Why should we trust you?
the privacy was part of the entire process in the development phases of the interstate photo system.
I know, but okay. The point is, as the GAO has rightfully, I think, pointed out, the FBI was required by law to comply with the law. You are part of the Department of Justice, and you failed to do so. I hope you can see how this is a problem.
A privacy impact assessment was initiated in 2008 on a pilot project for a proof of concept. Throughout the whole process, our privacy attorney was being advised of the changes that were being made in the development.
Yeah, well, we don't believe you. And the second part of that is you're supposed to make that public. And the failure here is years after it was supposed to be made public, you didn't do it. You were using it in a real-world circumstance. You were actually using it and didn't issue the statement. Let me move on. You said a couple of times, Ms. Del Greco, in your testimony that this was and I quote, an investigative lead, that everybody should relax. It's just being used for an investigative lead, correct?
That is correct.
So why not collect everybody's fingerprints? That would be an investigative lead, right? Wouldn't that be easier if you had everybody's fingerprints? Why not collect everybody's fingerprints?
We use fingerprint technology as a positive identification, and we still do today.
But why not collect them all in advance? I mean, that would be easier, right? If you had a database, you collect them all in advance. Then when you go and you pull off somebody's fingerprints, you got a database, right? Why not do that?
Fingerprints are collected with a criminal mugshot for an arrested purpose, for a law enforcement purpose.
But you see the difference, right? Somebody's actually arrested, then they take their fingerprints. Somebody who is actually convicted, then you collect then you have your fingerprints. But why not get them all in advance? What if we had all 330 million Americans' fingerprints in advance? That would be easier, wouldn't it? It would be easier, right? That's a question.
We collect fingerprints with a criminal law enforcement purpose only.
Right, right. Why not collect everybody's DNA? How about when everybody's born in the United States, we take a little vial, a sample of blood? Why don't we do that? And then we'd have everybody's DNA. And then when there's a crime, then we could go back and say, oh, well, let's collect that DNA, and now we have 330 million Americans. That would be easier, wouldn't it?
I'm not at liberty to speak about the DNA collection.
This is different. See, this is how DNA is a valuable investigative tool. Fingerprints are a valuable investigative lead and tool. But what scares me is the FBI and the Department of Justice proactively trying to collect everybody's face. And then having a system with a network of cameras where if you go out in public, that too can be collected and then used in the wrong hands, nefarious hands, somebody in government misusing it. It does scare me. Are you aware of any other country that does this? Anybody on this panel? Is there any other country that's doing this? Let me ask you one other thing, and I'm going past my time here. Do you have plans to match this database up with anything that's posted on social media? So in other words, if you go up on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and whatever the next new technology is, are you collecting that information that is out there on social media?
No, we are not. The only information the FBI has and have collected in our database are criminal mugshot photos. We do not have any other photos in our repository.
That's not true. You're not collecting driver's licenses?
We do not have driver's license photos in our repository at the FBI.
Does anybody care to weigh in on this? Mr. Bedoya?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a technicality. Who owns and operates a database matters a lot less than who uses it and how it's used. The FBI has access to now 18 states' driver's license photos that either can run those searches or request them. We're talking more than a third of all Americans. So the FBI does have access to these photos, has searched them tens of thousands of times, and apparently by GAO's testimony never audited those searches for misuse.
Would you disagree with that, Ms. Del Greco?
We have access to the data. We do not maintain the data in our repository. And the access we have is pursuant to the provision in the Driver's Protection Act within the state in accordance with federal law.
Does anybody else care to weigh in on this topic? Ms. Lynch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also add that the FBI has civil photos in its repository, so it's not just relying on driver's license databases, but it also has access to civil photos in its own NGI IPS database. These photos may in the future come from background checks that people submit to as trying to get employment or as a licensing requirement, but the database is not limited to just mugshot photos.
Would the Chairman yield?
Sure.
Grow over Jim Comey's scripted responses to questions raised by the House Intelligence Oversight Committee. The proof you are about to see of collusion between the FBI and Democrats is beyond any doubt and throws into question the very legitimacy of the FBI in matters pertaining to partisan politics. Watch for yourselves as Congress and the FBI attempt to fool the American public. The Jim Comey con begins right away with the opening statements. Pay attention to the manner in which he reads the words he's about to say.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
Now, in that statement, he confirms the existence of an ongoing investigation into the Trump administration, i.e. wiretap, surveillance, invasion of privacy. But what you should be paying attention to is how this plot unfolds. The next character in this story is Ranking Member Adam Schiff, with his line of questioning. Pay attention to how this member of Congress is reading his lines as he questions the witness.
I want to begin by attempting to put to rest several claims made by the President about his predecessor, namely that President Obama wiretapped his phones. So that we can be precise, I want to refer you to exactly what the President said and ask you whether there is any truth to it. First, the President claimed, quote, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism," unquote. Director Comey, was the President's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
And now this is where the plot is about to thicken. Watch as Comey reads his responses to those questions.
With respect to the President's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components.
What does this mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means that Comey was given the questions ahead of time, much like Hillary during the debates. He was given the questions so that he could prepare his answers. Comey reads his opening statement in very much the same way that Congressman Schill reads his questions. Then comes the Comey Con. He reads his responses to the congressman's questions. This is absolute proof of collusion. This whole sequence was staged so that it could be played around the world with the headlines, FBI denies Trump's wiretapping claims. Had this been an honest exchange, there would have been no need to prepare a script. But that's what it was, a script, and they were reading their lines like out of a movie. This proves beyond any doubt that the FBI is colluding with Democrats, that Comey and Schiff got together to plan out this entire exchange. And to make sure that they didn't forget any choice words, they wrote everything down so that the exchange could be replayed millions of times for unsuspecting viewers. This goes way beyond misleading the public. This goes way beyond being dishonest. What you're seeing here is part of a silent coup, an act of subversion to overthrow the President of the United States, the legitimate winner of the 2016 elections. They are using these Russia investigations as part of their plan to bring forward impeachment hearings against the president. Either Trump is going to drain the swamp today or the swamp is coming back to impeach him. That's the bottom line. This entire Russia investigation, if you remember, is based on covering up what was in the Podesta emails. It's to distract away from the Hillary pay-to-play and the network of known pedophiles and sex offenders harbored within the Clinton Foundation. The question we should be asking ourselves now is, since the FBI is no longer being objective, and since they're being used as a tool to persecute the will of the American people, who the fuck is going to be investigating the FBI? Each and every day, the FBI is aiding and abetting the enemy of the American people. The corrupt system of secret societies that has plunged our country into endless wars, that has transformed the American public into hopeless slaves of a technotronic tyranny that is hell-bent on destroying the planet and the human race with its transhuman, post-human agenda. And it's engraved its plans in the Georgia Guidestones, and it's being financed by an elite network of spirit-cooking, drug-running pedophiles.
The FBI's handling of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server under yet new layer of scrutiny. The wife of an FBI official who eventually went on to oversee the Clinton email investigation received at least $400,000 for her state Senate campaign from a PAC of longtime Clinton ally and Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe.
It's hard for the average American to see this anything other as an attempt to put a down payment on influencing the FBI investigation. Look, I've run a lot of campaigns in the state of Virginia, and I need to put the money a little bit in perspective. Saying that it's 1/3 of the total intake she had for her campaign is not enough. In fact, Terry McAuliffe, who's in the top 3 in the Clinton world, and his allies gave her basically as much money as the incumbent who won that state Senate race raised in total. So when you take that into account, there's a lot going on here. And the fact also that McCabe's husband was actually promoted within the FBI during the investigation should raise a lot of eyebrows. This is a lot more than an optics problem. This is obviously an apparent conflict of interest.
David Morey, the director McCabe, was promoted to deputy, where in that position he assumed for the first time an oversight role in the investigation into Secretary Clinton's emails.
You can't review 650,000 new emails in 8 days. You can't do it, folks. Hillary Clinton is guilty. She knows it. The FBI knows it. The people know it. And now it's up to the American people to deliver justice at the ballot box on November 8th.
CNN has learned that the nation's top intelligence officials provided information to President-elect Donald Trump and to President Barack Obama last week about claims of Russian efforts to compromise President-elect Trump.
CNN learns the FBI is continuing to to investigate an odd computer link between a Russian bank and the Trump organization.
You say there was a wiretap?
That there was a wiretap of Russian agents, and that those Russian agents were communicating with Trump staff. That's why they were picked up.
How do you know that?
That's what the intelligence community has told us. That's what's been reported very widely. Those are the facts.
Nobody was able to confirm what you guys have. That, number one, a FISA warrant was issued, correct? You're 100% sure.
We're 100% sure, yes. A FISA warrant was issued on the overall investigation into Russian hacking, and a separate warrant was issued to investigate the server that was registered to Trump Tower. When did Hillary know about it? Remember, she tweeted about it, and a Slate News magazine also wrote a story about it at the same time. She talked about these nefarious connections between Trump and Russia and his server, and then we had Harry Reid last October make those same claims. But remember, it was in October when the FBI opened their investigation into the server and closed it.
So now that we can confirm that there was in fact a FISA warrant issued and that there were wiretaps conducted on the Trump organization, we need to be able to link that to some sort of government body that would have conducted those wiretaps. And that brings us to this article from the New York Times. Secret court says FBI aids misled judges in 75 cases. The nation's secret intelligence court has identified more than 75 cases in which it says it was misled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and documents in which the Bureau attempted to justify its needs for wiretaps and other electronic surveillance, according to the first of the court's rulings to be released publicly. So this article is telling us that the FBI has a track record of misleading the FISA court so that it can wiretap individuals. This says that the FBI lies and that the FBI wiretaps individuals. So logically, this brings us back to the director of the FBI, who would have been aware that this agency was wiretapping the Trump organization and had brought forward misleading information to the FISA courts to warrant those wiretaps. The question we should be asking now is, would Comey do that? To answer that question, we just have to look back at his conduct during the congressional investigation into the Hillary server. Take a listen.
No, I think we'd have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt a general awareness of the unlawfulness of your conduct. You knew you were doing something you shouldn't do. And then, obviously that's on the face of the statute itself, then you need to consider, so who else has been prosecuted and what circumstances, because it's all about prosecutorial judgment. But those two things would be the key questions. Can you prove that the person knew they were doing something they shouldn't do, a general criminal intent, general mens rea,
but the
way to treated other people similarly?
The way to prove that is whether or not someone took steps to conceal or destroy what they've done. That is the best evidence you have, that they knew it was wrong, that they lied about it.
It's very good evidence. Always want to look at what the subject said about their conduct.
So even though the FBI had evidence that Hillary had the intent to cover up her crimes by wiping her servers with BleachBit, and even though they said the intent was the determining factor on whether a crime had been committed, they chose not to pursue this case. They chose not to pursue a crime, which means they're part of a cover-up for political gain. Not surprising, given that Obama appointed Comey to the position of FBI director. Now the question that we should be asking here is, would somebody appointed by Obama conduct an illegal investigation into Trump and tap his phones for political gain? Of course he would. If Comey scuttled the obvious case against Hillary for partisan politics, he would obviously tap Trump's phone for partisan politics as well.
The FBI quietly dumping more Hillary Clinton emails. It happened last night while much of the public was busy watching the Packers versus the Giants. 300 pages of documents put out by the FBI showing Mrs. Clinton was regularly sending confidential and secret information to someone outside the government. And this evidence makes it clear that his last judgment on the matter of prosecution was utterly in error, does it not?
You're absolutely correct. This is the smoking gun if ever there was one. It ramps up the case for her prosecution.
Good evening, I'm Justin Farmer.
I'm Jovita Moore. We broke news on Twitter today that Kentucky and West Virginia trace possible cyber attacks to the same U.S. Department of Homeland Security IP address found in a similar attempt in Georgia.
This IP address did access our election night results on November 7, 2016. Kentucky responded the same IP address did touch the Kentucky online voter registration system on one occasion, November 1, 2016.
Breaking news, the Washington Post now confirms that it was the Department of Homeland Security that hacked 20 different Republican states in the run-up to the presidential elections, and not the Russians. We repeat, the Washington Post now confirms it was the Department of Homeland Security and not the Russians that hacked the presidential elections.